There's the man. There's the man. Let's go, man. You talking?
You guys are live.
Yeah, Brett, are you there, man? You with me? Brett's evidently not hearing me. Testing 1, 2, 3, Brett. Come in,
Testing
Brett.
1, 2, 3, Brett. Come in, Brett.
What's up?
Hey, you are there. Hey. I thought maybe I was just seeing a picture of you.
You are there.
Oh boy.
Hi, fellas. How are you?
We're trying to do just wonderful. We're trying to just kill it tonight.
I know.
If
You
we
guys
can-
have a special guest. Brett, are you on there? Come on, Brett. Get on there. I see him flashing. He's looking at his eyes, but I'm going to bring you guys a special guest in. Are you ready? You guys ready
I'm
for him?
ready.
Bring you guys.
His name is James Larson from USFL Newsroom. What's wrong, Brett? Why are you shaking your head? Oh, we lost Brett.
Oh boy.
There's James. How are you, sir?
Boy, oh boy. Technical issues left and right. How about it?
Let's
Last
say
week we
this-
had me in
this-
the car trying to figure out the audio, and now we're coming in and people are coming and people are going. And you know what? It feels right because you know what? The spring football scene, there's a lot of people coming and going right now. It's a whole lot of unknowns. So you know what? It's just the way it is, right?
We're going to interview one way or another tonight because, last week you tried to interview driving your convertible. And now this week.
Guys, for the record, I do not have a convertible. Spring football is not that profitable yet, okay? We're not there yet.
That's you.
Just had to get that disclaimer out there, guys.
Oh, is that what it is? Look, you got dirty tonight with no hat on, which
Wow.
that shocker, I know, right?
I wore the hat for you. How about that?
Is that what it was? Should I go get my hat? Should I go get a hat?
He still needs a haircut. But
oh my God. No, but let's get into it. This is the bottom line. I am filling in for Brett till we get Brett's technical difficulties worked out. Right there is the host, Daddy Ed, and we are joined with the PFN insider himself, Mr. James Larson. There it is. Now, Dirty feels more. I feel more myself.
You're in it. You're in your zone now.
I feel like I need to find a hat somewhere.
Oh my God. Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Is that what you just said? But no, let's talk about it. I mean, the big thing, James, Daddy Ed wants to know, the whole entire world wants to know the merger talks.
Where are we at? What's the latest and the
James?
greatest?
You know, I'm going to be completely honest. It's hard to know where we're at right now because there's so many rumblings, there's so many rumors, there's so many smoke screens. And to be quite frank, I mean, I think the leagues are still in the middle of certain discussions. There's still things being panned out. It hasn't been officially approved yet, as far as I know. So we're still in the process. We're still in the middle of things, and it might be a little while before we actually get official word from the league.
Now, Daddy Ed, break it down for James because James isn't like you. He's a numbers guy, like you are. Okay, and.
Yep.
We're all talking about what teams are going, what teams are staying, and all of that stuff with this whole new merger. I think we can all be on agreements that we don't think the Roughnecks should be gone.
Yeah, that was a given, and that was nothing more than looking at the success of the Roughnecks in the XFL. Every partial season and regular season that we had, they were always towards the top, and teams in the XFL, and pair that with the Gamblers, who are basically non-existent in the USFL. It just didn't make any sense to us. So we've been pushing hard to tell them to keep the Roughnecks and drop the Gamblers. So we'll see if we're being heard at all.
There he is. Hello, Brett. You're in, bro. Brett.
I think Brett's the guy we're getting the echo from.
Yeah, we didn't have an
we didn't
echo
have an
till
echo
Brett
till
come on.
Brett come on.
I don't think he can.
I think we put him back in that deer stand.
It's not me. We ain't had a problem the last few shows.
All right, I'm jumping off.
Yeah, jump off because it's you. Thank you.
So
How's it
No,
going,
basically,
it's
guys?
Brett.
No,
Brett, it's you, man.
Yeah, it's Brett because now we got the echo back.
Brett, do you have like earbuds or something you could stick in?
No, like I said, I don't have a problem ever. Not where I'm at, so I don't know what the deal is.
All right. Well, anyways, I think we're talking about the Roughnecks and some of the success that they had the last year with the XFL, and of course, going back to 2020. I think Dirty was about to ask me, what the deal is there. So I'm just gonna assume that he wants me to answer that. And we still got to wait and see how this whole thing plays out. From everything I've heard, from everything a lot of other people have heard, it sounds like the Gamblers are more likely to stay. And I think there's a couple of reasons or factors for that. One. Man, that echoes crazy.
Jeez.
For one, you've got this is really weird. For one, you've got the Gamblers have that 1980s nostalgia, and that's something that I know Fox really, really likes. It's something that they want moving forward. And secondly, Houston is a great sports town, so you're likely to have a bunch of fans who are going to come out, whether it's the Gamblers or Roughnecks. And of course, you're going to have some Roughnecks diehards that are not going to be too happy about the change to the Gamblers. But at the end of the day, most of those Roughnecks fans are still going to support the Gamblers or whatever team ends up being there. So I think that it's not set in stone by any means, but if the Gamblers do end up in Houston, which it's seeming like it will be that way, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as some people are making it out to be. Well,
but I, as much as they would like to think that it's likely that the Roughneck fan base would eventually migrate over to the Gamblers. It's almost, to me, it's like, why would you want to go through that painstaking thing? I don't know. I get what you're saying about the Gamblers, but at the end of the day, the current fans of today, do they really know anything about the nostalgia of the 1980 Gamblers?
Right.
So
right. I mean, for example, you look at, especially if you look at a lot of the numbers based around the USFL and the people that watch that league and the XFL, and the XFL definitely had a younger audience. So, generally speaking, a lot of those Roughnecks fans probably weren't around when the Gamblers were around back in the 1980s. So that's something else to take into account. And I think that's a reason why, I'm trying to make the point here that even though a lot of the reports and a lot of the things that we've heard have made it sound like the Roughnecks would be on the chopping block, nothing is set in stone yet. So I still think that there's a chance that we see the leagues end up making the decision of being like, all right, you know what? We were going to go with the Gamblers, but we're seeing how the fans are reacting. We're seeing the direction that this is going in, and let's keep the Roughnecks instead. Because either way, you're going to have a team in Houston, right? It's not like this is a decision where you're getting out of a city. You're just trying to figure out which team is going to be in the said city of Houston. So, again, it's a fluid situation, and we'll just have to wait and see how it all pans out.
And, as we talk about the two different sides, as far as, most rumblings you hear is 12 teams split 8-4 versus 6-6. Being in the perfect world, I would love the 6-6 USFL, XFL divisions with the championship of the two division winners. But at the end of the day, I think if you at least have a 12-team league, that's a victory in itself. It'd be nice to make the league bigger coming out of all this.
I agree. And, again, with the teams, 12 teams makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, you're going from 16, you cut 2 from each league, or you see how that pans out. But there's still a chance that it ends up being 10. And I'd say there's also a possibility we end up seeing 14. I don't think that's out of the question. I'd say 12 makes the most logical sense, especially if you're trying to kick off a season in 2024, then let's do 12 teams, shelve a few others, and then eventually bring them back down the road. But we'll have to wait and see. But I completely agree with you there that it would be nice to see the parity between both.
Are you also hearing, just purely speculation on my part? I don't have anything to base it off of, but I just feel like, it's pretty much etched in stone, and it has been from day one that Vegas was out. So to me, as far as, if they're really looking at cost, it just makes sense for Seattle to go with Vegas to kind of cut that whole West Coast thing out for now. Now, when there's relocations or there's teams added, you can bring that whole West Coast back to life. And whether it's Reno, Phoenix, Oakland, San Diego, I mean, you name it, you could put a Western division together relatively quick in an expansion league. But I think if cost is any kind of consideration to begin with on day one, that Seattle sitting out there on an island just doesn't make sense.
No, I completely agree with you there. Again, we'll have to wait and see how this all pans out. It's fluid, but like to your point, if they're trying to, if they use the hub system, or even if they don't, it makes sense to eliminate a couple of those teams on the western side of the country, because then you're saving a lot on travel costs. You don't have to worry about the logistics of figuring all that out. And then in a year or two down the road, you can reintroduce teams on the west coast or on the western side of America. And it makes a lot more sense to do it that way. As for Vegas, I mean, it's obvious that they're not going to be whatever this new league is, right? Let's say it's a merged league with 16 teams, or let's say it's somehow where they merge, but each league plays its own separate season for one more year. Vegas won't be a part of it either way. It's just plain and simple. Vipers won't be there. Now, here's the tricky part, and this is something, this is more rumors and speculation than anything. But of course, we were looking at the fact that the Vegas Vipers might move to Tempe, Florida, or they could move to Nashville, or even Portland was thrown out there as an option. So if the XFL were to have another season separate from the USFL, I'd say it's safe to say that Vipers won't be in Vegas, but they'll be somewhere. In a merged league, I think they just shelved the team permanently. I don't see why they would keep it.
So Brett's having some technical difficulties. He said he's not really feeling that well, and he thinks that might be a lot of what's going on. So I'm going to help fill in today.
Sounds good. Brett, prayers up. Hope you're doing all right, buddy.
Right,
Was you able to hear our conversation thus far so we don't repeat?
Well, yeah, I've been sitting in the back. I sit in the background and listen the whole time. What do you expect?
Well, I know, but being the technician that you are, I figured you were underneath taking bolts out and all kind of stuff. So you maybe didn't hear everything that was going on. So.
Oh no, I was. So here's the thing that I and I mean, James, you'd mentioned that nobody really knows what is going on, right? So like here, Mike says right here, you gotta love Mike because he literally watches like everything that we do. He says, James, why do you think most, if not all, cities did not promote the leagues much? I live in Central Florida and rarely heard anything regarding the Tampa Bay Bandits or the Orlando Guardians outside of social media.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. I mean, for one, you're looking at two teams from two different leagues with two different strategies. So the Tampa Bay Bandits, you weren't going to hear much about them in season one because obviously the USFL, all their teams played in Birmingham. They only had one hub city that they were playing in. So while there were advertisements throughout the country, a lot of the local marketing was focused purely on Birmingham because that was the only city that they were playing in that season. And then Tampa Bay ended up getting shelved for season 2. The Memphis Showboats took over. So, of course, Tampa Bay wasn't even on the table this past year. The Orlando Guardians, a little bit of a different story. I know the league really made a pretty big push there. Interestingly enough, Orlando had more ticket sales people than some of the other cities like St. Louis and San Antonio. But the Guardians, I think the biggest issue with that whole situation was that the league, they didn't really have a great marketing plan in place this past season. You look at some of the reports that came out just regarding the amount of money that they were spending on marketing compared to other things. And the marketing kind of took a backstage. And it makes sense as to why we saw some of those lower attendance numbers, especially in a place like Orlando, where they were doing what they could internally to push ticket sales, but they weren't doing a whole lot out in public. They weren't really connecting with the community, which in part is actually something that we've been seeing more this offseason. You know, I got to give a shout out to my guy, Corey Helvey. He's the guy that's running the ticket sales down there in Orlando. And you've seen the Guardians, they've been everywhere. They've been out and about. They've been at college football games. They've been at high school football games. They've been at different events in Orlando. And that's the type of stuff that you really have to do if you want to build a successful fan base moving forward. But yeah, to answer your question there, that's kind of my synopsis on why you haven't heard much about either team. And if the Orlando Guardians stay in this merged league, I'd expect you to hear a lot more of them moving forward.
Yeah, Daddy Ed, you got the numbers, right? Do you have them on you?
I have the numbers, yes.
Because I want you to read the numbers to James, because I want to get James's take on this, because you know, when we talk about what teams are going to go, I mean, the latest, you know, James, like you'd reported, you know, you were talking, what was it, 8-4, right? 8-4. Now, Daddy Ed, read the numbers that you have for James, and I want to get James' take on it.
Just to preface this, I went back and I looked at the regular season for both leagues, and I took the average viewership of each team for the season. Now, granted, they play someone different every week, but that one team, I took their viewership and averaged it over the regular season. And what I found is that, especially on the XFL side, you know, everybody was so taken back by the fact that Seattle would be out of the league, and they talked about how crappy their schedule was and all the, you know, but at the end of the day, as crappy as the schedule is, if you can't go to the game, you can still watch it on TV, and they weren't even doing that, because for ticket sales, average attendance, they were fourth in the league, but they were dead last in viewership. And so the same at the same time, what's kind of crazy about the numbers is you got Vegas, who was dead last on attendance, but they actually finished third, right behind St. Louis and San Antonio for viewership. So as Fox looks at the teams, you know, they want to say Fox is all based on viewership. Then to me, it's black and white looking at viewership, which teams would be in and what teams would be out. Now, Seattle, interestingly enough, being dead last on viewership, they still average more viewership than the Pittsburgh Maulers, the New Orleans Breakers, and they almost beat the Houston Gamblers. I mean, they're basically within 3,000 a game with the Gamblers. So to me, if you're talking viewership, why is Fox so married to their teams when their viewership, now granted you got hubs, but there's three teams that their viewership was abysmal in the USFL. So my question would be is, what's making Fox show so much allegiance to the, you know, the Houston Gamblers, New Orleans Breakers, and the Pittsburgh Maulers when their viewership was so bad? And if they really wanted to put a league together that promoted both attendance and viewership, you would think they'd want the best of both worlds. But it seems to me that they still want to take the subpar teams in the USFL and cut teams from the XFL that, you know, maybe didn't have the best record like Vegas, but they were third in the XFL in viewership. And Vegas would have finished above the Houston Gamblers and the Philadelphia Stars. I mean, they had better viewership than the top four almost of the General Stallions, Panthers, and Showboats. So I guess kind of I threw a bunch of numbers out there, but what I'm trying to get at is that Fox is putting and has put so much emphasis on viewership. Why are they seem to be so readily willing to get rid of teams that in the XFL that maybe would outperform the USFL for viewership?
That is a ton to break down. That was that was a lot there, Ed. And there's a lot of different points that we got to cover there. So first, I want to talk about Seattle being in last place, according to what you said in viewership. And it's something to take into account there is that the Sea Dragons, they only had one nationally televised game all year. There were a lot of teams that had games on ABC, which was the only over-the-air network that the XFL had. You know, you had ABC, and then you had ESPN, which is of course a massive channel, but it's not over the air. And then you had ESPN2 and FX. So Seattle, they only had one game in Week 6 against Orlando. Actually, funny enough, on ABC, that was their only over-the-air game. So that to me is a reason why they probably would be down lower compared to some of the other teams like San Antonio and DC and some other teams that had and Arlington that were on ABC a lot more often. To get to your point about Fox and, you know, all of the logistics surrounding, you know, why are they making this move? Why are they making that move? What's the deal with viewership? Why wouldn't they commit to teams that aren't in cities? Of course, Fox cares about viewership, but they're also taking into account that some of these teams aren't in their cities. So why would they expect the numbers to be super high, right? I mean, you look at a game like the New Orleans Breakers against the Houston Gamblers. How many people can you expect to be tuning into those games at the moment, considering neither one of those teams is in their cities, right? I mean, especially if they're showing on cable, right? Most of those games are on like USA Network or, you know, FS1. You can't expect a large crowd to show up for teams that aren't in their cities yet. And that's just the name of the game. And Fox is sticking to their plan. You know, as for the whole 8-4 scenario, you know, that's something that I reported on because I've heard it from multiple credible sources. Of course, I wouldn't put that out there if there was no merit to it, but it's by no means confirmed. And I think I made that clear that it's something that's still a fluid situation. You know, things can change. So will we see 8-4? I'm not 100% sure. It's something, again, I've heard pretty often. But like you said, we could see 6-6. We could see a whole other iteration, right? You know, as I mentioned, we could still see 10 teams. We could still see 12 teams. We could see 14 teams. I don't think we see 16 just because, you know, of course, we can't see 2 Houston teams. Vegas is probably out regardless. But it'll come down at the end of the day to what they can get legally approved. So that might not be 8-4. That might not be 6-6. We don't really know. And we won't get that clarity until that information is made public.
Now, see, James, like I listened to Ed's numbers and then I listened to what you say here, what you were saying there, right? It's funny because like if you look at all this, it changes day by day by day by day. You know, I mean, we know that there's been a hiring freeze within the USFL's ticket community. You know, like you mentioned Corey Helvey down there in Orlando, how he's just been busting his hump to get things going in Orlando. And I start to look at this and I start to see something, you know, you're seeing the traction that the Roughnecks are starting to make, the fans in the Roughnecks that are starting to make on social media. Could this really just be Fox saying, you know, like Brett says right here, why are we what are we reporting now? Reportedly, what's the holdup? What is? I mean, literally, we're in regulatory. What is the holdup? I mean, this is just keeps going and going and going.
Right.
And
I mean, and I'm gonna be honest. I don't have those answers clearly right now. I mean, we just don't. Nobody does. There's rumors or speculation. I mean, obviously, there's some holdups legally. I think most of it is logistics. But I want to circle back really quick and make a point about the whole viewership thing, right? You know, let's say it is 8-4, and let's say that Fox is deciding to keep the New Orleans Breakers over the Seattle Sea Dragons or the Vegas Vipers or whoever. And it's like, oh, why would they do that? A team that's in a hub. If you look at the viewership numbers, yes, the XFL teams, there were some teams that did better. And here's why. One, they were in their cities. So, of course, they're going to have more viewership, whether or not they were whether or not they're going to be in the new league. And secondly, Fox got very similar numbers and they spent way less money. Like, just think about all the money the XFL went through this past season. I mean, of course, Forbes came out with that $60 million figure. We know it was more than that. But either way, the XFL spent way more than Fox did to get very similar results, even though they were playing in all 8 cities. I mean, we can make all these debates and go back and forth on whether or not this XFL team did better on this station, or this USFL team, they did better on this station. At the end of the day, they were very similar. I mean, come on, both leagues averaged what, like 600 something thousand viewers this year. So at the end of the day, it's like, what makes the most sense? Again, this is about money. So we got to look more at the financial side of things rather than some of these semantics on the side of what's going on in broadcasting. I don't know. I mean, again, this is pure speculation. This is more of just me trying to put the pieces together on my end. But again, like I'm saying, the USFL spent a lot less money, so that could play into things.
James, you just pulled on the heartstrings of that guy sitting right next to you, Daddy Ed there. When it comes to numbers, it's funny that you say that because me and Daddy Ed had off the air talked about numbers and stuff, right? And I'm kind of looking at some of the stuff because I made notes. But we had came up to, Daddy Ed, if I'm not mistaken, we'd come up to close to almost 120 million that the XFL actually spent for the 2023 season. Am I right?
Yeah. Again, where there's a lot of guessing game going on there, but when you run hard numbers, you're still not counting all the incidentals that we don't see that they ended up spending a lot of money on too. So I can buy that when you say they probably lost X amount of dollars, and it was probably more than that. And it probably was more than that because we didn't see everything that they were throwing money at.
Right. And that's another thing, again, a lot of this is going to come down to what financially makes sense. So again, on paper, you might look at some of the XFL's numbers and they might be higher in certain cities, and it's because they spent so much more to get there. So it's like, is it really worth spending tens of millions of dollars more in certain areas just to get 50,000 more viewers here, or just to get 8,000 more people in a city in these seats, when we already know that Fox doesn't need people in the seats to survive? They've gotten through 2 seasons. Again, the problem is too, is people forget that these leagues have such different structures of how they make money and how they were going to survive on their own. So now I think the reason why we're seeing some of this holdup is because both leagues now, if you're trying to merge and you have 2 different structures, now it's like you got to pick and choose what's best from both. So it's still a process that they're working through.
Daddy Ed, you're the numbers guy. Well, I mean, okay. Is it about marketing or is it about money? Because I look at it this way. Like,
well, it's got to be about marketing, because if you want to increase the bottom line, you got to increase the top line. I mean, that goes hand in hand. So you need the marketing. And, we all know that the marketing in the XFL, I can't speak so much for the USFL. I didn't follow it as close. But I can say in the XFL, the marketing was horrific. So when you talk about poor marketing followed by spending way too much on everything, I can see where that equates to big losses. So,
now Brett says here, and this I kind of disagree with, because the XFL or the USFL has shown it that it didn't need butts in the seats. He put bats, but then here he puts butts in the seats. I mean, did they really need it?
Like, again, it's one of those things where their mantra is crawl, walk, run. Just from everything that we've heard coming out of the USFL side of things, it's clear that they're in a position to keep this going and slowly build upon each year. Again, season 1, we only had 1 hub, and season 2, we had 4. We were in 4 cities. People forget, again, we saw some of those games where there weren't a lot of people in the stands, but like, why are we expecting there to be fans when it's the Memphis Showboats playing the Houston Gamblers? And well, actually, they did play in Memphis. That's a terrible example. When it's the Houston Gamblers playing the New Orleans Breakers in Memphis, right? It's like, why are we expecting there to be any, like, we should be surprised that there's 250 people there, right? I mean, it's friends and family. That's what you'd expect. So again, to get back to your point there, it's one of those things where I feel like both leagues are trying to come together and figure out what makes the most financial sense moving forward. Because again, if you don't have the right financials in place, spring football is never going to survive. Butts and seats of course we want butts in the seats. It's like, and I think some people think that I prefer hubs over the cities. It's like, of course I don't. I mean, I would much rather see us all have electric fan bases in each of these cities because we know that the fan bases exist. But at the end of the day, do we want no spring football or hub spring football? And personally, I'm going with hub spring football every time.
I mean, I'm not just going to disagree. I think that's the way it looks. I mean, look, if this merger does, well, it's not if this merger goes through, it's when this merger goes through. You're already looking at, regardless of how they do it, Why are you shaking your head, Daddy Ed? Why are you shaking your head? Why are you shaking your head? Where'd he go? Well, everybody's having
I think
a bad
he glitched out.
connection.
I don't think it was
Everybody's he's not in a very good area. I mean, James, look, we hear stuff every single day, something totally different every single day of what this is going
crazy.
on. It's absolutely insane on how we see this every single day. And I mean, to me, it's which works financially better. You need one league for it to work. You don't need two leagues. Two leagues, spring football is not going to work. Can we agree to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and here's the thing, I did when both leagues were going on. I mean, of course, I cover both. I support both. I think both are vital to the spring football landscape. But at the end of the day, when you look at the history of spring football, it's been difficult enough for one league to survive. I don't think many of us were expecting two to survive on their own. It's just plain and simple. So I really think that the merger is such an exciting thing because it allows for these two major corporations between the people on the XFL side of things and Fox to come together, unite under one umbrella, and hopefully give this a legitimate platform for years to come.
All right, here we go. They're back in. All right. Boy, James, you got them all riled up.
Oh boy.
Brett's got a weird face on him. Daddy Ed's all fired up because of where he's at. Because his connection's not that good. Brett, what do you want to say? Come on, baby. It says your guest Brett is on an Android Chrome.
Can't fucking hear me.
We can hear you. You gotta love live television.
Hey, it's a good thing we're not on ESPN right now, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna text him this. We can hear you, dude. We can hear you. There you go. All right, Daddy Ed, what do you got to say what James says?
Well, I actually got kicked off, so I was just coming back in myself.
No, we were talking about what me and James were talking about was with the numbers and all that. The USFL has proven they don't need to have butts in the seats for this thing to work for them. We've seen that. The XFL, it seems like their model was they spent too much money to get into their home markets. Now with this merger, when this merger happens, you're going to have, I don't know, 7 cities, 8 cities that have home markets with the few left out. So that's where the USFL wanted to be.
I mean, it's hard to say what the amount of cities that we'll have. It really will come down to what they can legally pull off, right? I mean, because they have certain stadium leases in place. Are there leases that they can get out of? Can they break their contracts in certain places? And then we know the USFL, they were talking to cities on their side of things, right? I mean, Philadelphia has been talked about. Pittsburgh's been talked about. Houston's been talked about. So much is up in the air. And now we lost Dirty.
No, you didn't lose Dirty. Dirty had to do something. I'm working backstage.
You can still hear me all right, though, right?
The technician over here.
I know, right? Yeah. So we can hear Brett. I keep getting the message that says that Brett is on an Android Chrome, which has a bug that causes an echo. Google is working on fixing it. For now, please ask your guests to wear headphones to avoid the echo. So it's something with, I guess it's something with Chrome is actually acting up on his end wherever he is.
Yeah, hey, tell him just to get a $10 pair of earbuds, so he'll be all right.
Exactly. I mean, now look, I mean, the latest, I don't know what the latest that you've heard, James, but I mean, I've heard different things now. They're talking that maybe we'll hear something by the first part of December. Brett had mentioned earlier in here that he said that where did he say it at? I gotta find it right here. Memphis is gonna have something possibly today or tomorrow or Thursday or Tuesday or Wednesday.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, again, there's so many rumors, there's so much speculation, and the league really isn't saying anything at all. So it's hard to know what's going on. But what we do know for a fact is that there's a CBA meetings going on this week with USFL players. So this is, regarding the Steelworkers Union that the USFL players are a part of. They're going to be meeting with, I'm assuming, just Fox because the merger hasn't gone through yet. But they'll be meeting with representatives from Fox, from the USFL, just to go over a bunch of things regarding player contracts, the union, things like that. So I'm assuming that we'll get something out of this week. What it is, who knows? It could be the tiniest little detail, but you'd have to imagine that there will be something to come of this meeting or these meetings because they start the 15th. They start Wednesday and they'll run through Friday the 17th.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was originally we had found the interview with Lacoby Tucker from his old high school, and the kid said that the XFL draft was supposed to be the 13th through the 15th. Well, now we know that's not going to happen.
Right.
I
mean, basically any draft has been postponed until this goes through. So,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Daddy Ed, what do you got? I know you got something.
But you're starting to see cities that are starting to try and leak. I mean, you're at least getting teams. I know I saw Birmingham, St. Louis. There's some cities now that are at least starting to put out there wanting you to buy season tickets. And so you can read between the lines that if they're selling season tickets and they're promoting season tickets, there must be a team. So then I saw a post by Anthony Beck, coach of the Battlehawks, this last week, where he was commenting on Martavis Bryant getting signed by the Cowboys and making the comment that he had 6 receivers on his team that outworked Martavis Bryant, and that was okay. He'll take all 6 of them back. Let's go win the league next season. So,
right.
He's not going to post stuff like that if he's not planning on coming back.
I mean, let's be real. Of course, no one's come out and said it officially, but St. Louis is going to be a part of the merger. I mean, that's just no ifs and buts about it. Why would you get rid of the greatest fan base that spring football has ever seen, at least in the modern era? Yeah, the St. Louis
you hearing that, Dirty?
Listen. You two are sitting here talking about. Hold on.
I want to make it clear that hasn't been confirmed to me, or that isn't me breaking. So again, this isn't confirmed, but again, it's everything that I've heard, everything that everybody else has heard. St. Louis, there's no way, there's no shot you merge a league and don't have St. Louis in it. There's just no way.
Listen, here's what I'm gonna say with spring football. There's no telling with spring football. You don't know what spring football is going to do. Spring football doesn't even know what it's going to do. You have a league that started in 1983. James, you probably weren't even born in 1983.
No.
Yeah, you probably weren't even thought of at that age, were you?
I highly doubt it. I mean,
right, exactly.
God was probably I'll wait another 20 years to bring James into the world.
But I was already graduated from high school by then.
Right. That league failed. Right? Okay, that league failed. Then you come into 01. That league failed. Right? Then you had the United Football League, Spring League. That league failed. Then you had Charlie's League. That league failed. Then you had XFL 20. Now, take away COVID, but James, I know that you'd gotten under good sources, and I'd gotten under good sources. Vince wasn't coming back for the second season in 20 for XFL 2020 because he was mad on how much money he lost in 2020. Mad. He wasn't going to do it again. So we'll just throw away 2020. Now you have the USFL and the XFL. USFL completes the season. Fox has been the only one that has got it past 2 seasons of this reiteration of spring football. So you don't know. We don't know if the Battlehawks now, would it be dumb if they bring them back?
I completely agree with you there. And, as I like to say, the world of spring football, you never know what's going to happen. So, of course, sure. And that's why I'm making it clear, like, this hasn't been confirmed. But we know for a fact that St. Louis was by far the best market in the XFL. It was actually reasonably profitable, I believe. And then you look at what Fox was doing, and we already know that I believe that Fox had an interest already in expanding to St. Louis at some point down the road. So this merger makes sense for them. Again, like, why would St. Louis be out of the equation? On paper, it makes 0 sense. Could it somehow happen? Sure, I guess, but the percentage is extremely low. I don't see why they would get out of St. Louis.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they will.
You're not going to have a successful merged league by getting out of St. Louis. It's just you're throwing away 35,000 fans. Like, come on.
Well, I mean, if you look at tickets now, I mean, there's a good chance they could open up the 400s because they're selling the 300 tickets now at the Dome. I mean, like right here, what Denzel Vance says right here. The only spring league that was successful was the Arena Football League, and that league failed.
Yeah. And here they come back in 2024. So
yeah, exactly.
It's like,
all right, Daddy Ed, come on. I know you got something.
Left and right. It's always something going on.
Always.
No, I just at the end of the day, the longer, I know they got to get this right, and I know they got talks, and all those things that's got to be settled. But I'm afraid that this is going to reach a point where they're going to start losing fans the longer and longer and longer this gets strung out. And I understand you want to keep things as close as possible and don't let things leak. But sometimes just doing a little bit of strategic leaking can be a healthy thing because it keeps everybody energized. Right now,
you don't have to tell me. That would be nice.
You're starting to see Facebook, go from rah spring league to now you're starting to see jokes. You're starting to see people visibly upset, and it's like, why do they want to continue to do this to the fan base without just throw a bone, man? It doesn't have to be a big bone. Just throw a bone,
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, and I think we do get something soon with these CBA meetings coming up, with some of the other things going on behind the scenes. You'd imagine they can't go much further past Thanksgiving without giving us something. So the hope is on the horizon. Let's just hope it's sooner than later.
Yeah. All right, James, thanks for joining us. I know that you got some stuff to do, so I do appreciate you joining us. Is there anything else that you want to throw in there? Anything else that you want to throw in there about what's going on and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I think, just to reiterate, I think people just need to fully understand that it's still a fluid situation. That once things become official, it'll be official. But until then, things can change. Some of the reports I made, again, like 8-4, I put that out there because it's something that I've heard from a lot of different people and it seems pretty legitimate. But again, it's fluid, nothing's set in stone. We could see 6-6, we could see 5-5, we could see some other iteration. Ultimately, it'll come down to what Fox and the XFL personnel think is the best decision for spring football moving forward. So we'll see. If the time keeps ticking on this thing, it's going to be interesting to watch if we will have a merged season in 2024 or if something else happens. I mean, at the end of the day, You know, it's the middle of November right now. We still have a few months before February comes around, but time is ticking. Time is ticking. So I'm hoping that we get something sooner than later.
Yeah, there you go. All right, James. Thank you for joining us, buddy. Brett says thank you. He said he texted me, said he's sorry that his thing was messed up and all that. So, but yeah, thank you for joining us, dude. I do appreciate it very, very much.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah,
It was great chatting with you all. And Brett, I hope you get better. And also, I hope you get yourself a pair of earbuds.
James, tell people where they can find you at.
You guys can find me at James Larson PFN on Twitter, or X. I still call it Twitter. Sorry, Elon, my bad. But that's where I'm at. Of course, I write for the Pro Football Newsroom covering the USFL and XFL. I also do photography covering the league. So if you want to check that out, check out my Instagram at James Larson Official. That's where I post all my photos. So I think that's about it.
There you go. All right, James. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Of course.
Thanks,
you guys
man.
have a great rest of your night. Thanks for having me on.
You too, bud.
Yeah.
All right, Daddy Ed. So James gave us a lot there.
When you think about it, he brought up some good points, and as we talk about the merger and the fact that at the end of the day, the XFL and USFL still need to come together as one league, or it's not going to survive the merger either. But as he talked about the viewership numbers, he did put a little bit of different twist on it, a little different perspective that did make some sense. And so, the whole viewership, having games in your home cities versus viewership for teams that never even got to sniff their home city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I've been saying. That's why I say the whole St. Louis thing. St. Louis is a complete anomaly. Okay. St. Louis is a complete anomaly on what it does. So when I talk about, we don't even need to put St. Louis in this talk with spring football because it's an anomaly all to itself. You know what I mean?
But you got to remember, I remember a few shows back when you and I were having a disagreement or a heated discussion on whether St. Louis should be a hub or not, and you weren't so sure that was the case. So
here's the reason why.
And so
go on, finish, because I'll tell you why I
was just gonna say, as he talked about the fact that it just made no sense whatsoever to not have St. Louis in any of the discussions as it pertains to the merger, and that's really the point that I was making with the numbers that night. But you were kind of hell bent on the fact that St. Louis didn't necessarily need to be a hub. And it's like, why would you take the one team that you referred to as an anomaly and chance upsetting that apple cart? It just doesn't. I don't see where that makes any sense. But
and here's the reason why I'll go back to that point with St. Louis. Of course, you make St. Louis a hub, right? You're going to get the fans that are going to go to the Battlehawk games, right? Now you're going to get the diehards like you, me, the guys like Rick Story, okay, that are going to stay at the games. But are they going to bring more people in? Like you saw that first year in Birmingham, they were bringing in people for both games originally. You know what I'm saying? By season 2, it wasn't so much. Okay, that they weren't by season 2. I just don't think that St. Louis would support a second team here in St. Louis. I just don't. I don't think St. Louis would travel well.
I'll say to that, and all I say about that is it's strictly at that point when you're talking about butts in the seats. I don't think you could name any city that was a hub that had a second home team there that wasn't from the city.
That's true.
I don't think there's any city that would have had any kind of drawing for the second game. So if you're not going to have a drawing for the second game, no matter where you put it, why wouldn't you at least put it in a city where you know the number one team's going to get 35, 40,000 in the seats? That's the only point I was making that day.
Yeah, and I see your point. I see it. But again, we look at the USFL model. We look at the XFL model. Regardless of what side of the fence you're on, the USFL model seemed to work better than the XFL model.
And he made a good point tonight too that I had to kind of take a step back and think about.
I saw that. That's why I brought it up. I saw it.
I took a step back because it's like, you know what? He is right. They had a season 1 uninterrupted. They had a season 2 uninterrupted, and they're heading into season 3. And it seems like the XFL just can't seem to get it right, and we struggle every year to have year 2. So he makes some good points. The crawl before you run argument makes a lot of sense, but as a fan, you want the perfect world. You want the college atmosphere football, the NFL where you're drawing big numbers and everybody plays in their home city. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the XFL fan base is.
Rob says, I think we could get a better attendance for a second game than in a single game in Vegas. Well, considering Vegas drew 6,500 people on average for their games, you really think we could get 6,500 for the second?
Maybe in week 1, maybe in week 2, maybe the first couple doubleheader home games or however they did. I don't know how they would do it. Maybe for the first game or 2, and I guess from then it would depend on the quality of football and what kind of games they were. And, but if you have week 1 where the second game is Bush City, USA versus River City, USA, and the game ends up 45-0, are you really going to get the drawing the next time? It's you really kind of becomes Russian roulette in a lot of ways. You're hoping that both games are nail biters in the first home game and 4 good teams that are battled to the end. But I don't know. I'd like to think that we would draw pretty good for the second game, but could we sustain it? I'm not so sure about that.
I would give you the first 2 weeks, and then here's what we know about St. Louis. We know St. Louis are fair weather fans, right? No, hold on. Look, how bad were the Cardinals this year?
Well, Cardinals, yeah, it's but the bright side of that, if you want to look for gains, when you had the Battlehawks and you had the St. Louis Cardinals playing at the same time in downtown St. Louis, St. Louis's attendance only dropped off 2,000 fans that weekend. So when you talk about a Cardinals game drawing 30-some thousand, at the same time the Battlehawks were playing, and the Battlehawks only suffered 2,000 butts in the seats, that's a win.
I agree. That's why I don't think come baseball season or hockey season here in St. Louis, that if you made St. Louis a hub city and had that other team, that's why I don't think they would draw as well. But again, it's like the Brahma Babe says right here. Call me an old school fan, but yes, I love being in my home city and having my team in that city. I can't wrap my head around the USFL hub model. I can't either, but they showed that it worked. That's all I'm saying. And I love the Cardinals too. I'm just using that as an example. The Cardinals were awful in what happened. They were giving away tickets. They were you at the close to the end of the year, you could buy $5 tickets to the Cardinal games, and they still weren't filling up the stadium.
This was the first season I actually saw that when the Cardinals sucked, that
the fans quit finally showing up.
the fans finally quit showing up, and
Yeah.
the last month of the season, they finally had an empty stadium, and it's like
great.
it's about damn time
Loved
that
it.
you make ownership responsible for putting a winning team on the field.
Yeah. Now, again, I think if you had two winning teams, two winning football teams here, okay, it's like Brahma Babe said right here. She goes, I don't think St. Louis would support San Antonio playing there like they do in St. Louis. I'm just going to use it. Let's say that you have the Brahmas and the Battlehawks at the Dome, and they're both winning teams. I guarantee you would get fans to go to that Brahmas team because they're watching a winning game. They're watching a winning team.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's a lot of weight to be put into. People want to watch winners,
exactly.
and so yeah, I that's really a good debate on that second game. What we think St. Louis could draw for the second game, but
Because you saw it with the USFL, you saw it with Michigan. Who did they have in with them? Or no, it was Philadelphia. Philadelphia played in Canton, right?
Philadelphia, New Jersey, yeah, and
Yeah, you're right. It was Philadelphia, New Jersey played in Canton. Philadelphia was winning. New Jersey wasn't. What did they start doing? The fans started showing up because they were watching a winning team. You know what I'm saying? Birmingham, they were winning. The New Orleans Breakers weren't winning, so they weren't there. People didn't go and watch it. You know, exactly, and then that's what it is. St. Louis, the people in St. Louis will not go and watch a losing team. They just won't. So I think if you had two winning teams here, then people would go and watch them. That's just my opinion. That's how I look at it. It is a good debate, though, isn't it? That is a good one.
it is. You just kind of hope you eventually have I don't know. I want spring football, so I guess I agree. I agree with them with the respect that we need it. We need spring football. So whatever that looks like at the beginning, I guess we try and do the best we can with it and get the USFL and XFL fans to, find that common ground, and eventually the league would get to where it needs to be. But, if it makes sense to financially responsible to take baby steps, then I guess you take baby steps.
Right, yeah, you're right here. The Rams were obviously proof. The Cardinals this year was proof of it. You're right. I mean, Amanda says here, the hyena says here, right here, she goes, did they open the upper deck in St. Louis to sell cheaper tickets then? How would that make any sense? That's a good question. If it costs so much to open up the upper deck, why would they do it if the Cards didn't do it and it didn't work? Look right here. John says it took the NFL 4 years to merge with the AA. Well, that's a totally different thing. With the AAL, makes these things take time. I wouldn't be surprised if we see one last season from the USFL and maybe the XFL before the major merger takes place in 2025. I would be okay with that. Kind of like do have each league do its own little farewell to its fans.
Swan song.
Yeah,
but if they were going to do that, if they had a lot of things to iron out yet, or they just weren't there, and the league was gonna, the merged league was just not possible, why wouldn't you come out at some point and say, you know what, we're just not there yet with the merged league, and just say you're going to have one more year of XFL and one more year of USFL? To me, it makes no sense to stay tight-lipped if you're still planning on having a regular season, because you want to start drumming up interest and getting people excited for the season, and all they're doing now is pissing people off. So I don't know if they're going to go ahead and have one more swan song season for both leagues. They could have
Yeah,
announced that weeks ago.
here's the thing, though. Let's really, and I know that we talked about this. When did I talk about this? When I kept saying, go by the XFL schedule of how they did stuff, right? Okay. If you look at the USFL, okay, they're still right on their timeline to start their season in April, right? They're still right on their timeline to start their season in April like they do for the last 2 years. Am I correct?
Yes.
Where are we at? If you're an XFL fan, where are you at? You're behind on your schedule of where
We're
you
big
were
time
at
behind.
this time last year. Because you got to remember, this time last year, on the 15th, 16th, and 17th, I was in Vegas for the XFL draft. We're not having one this year. This year. We already had all of our team names by then. Right? We had all of our teams. What we didn't have is where's Vegas playing? Correct?
Yeah.
We didn't get that until what? December? Right? Yeah, December when we got the schedule.
Yeah.
Is the XFL even close to that right now? So who's really on top of it to actually start their season? To
That's
me,
probably. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah. To me, if you look at it like right here, all they're doing is adjusting the XFL schedule to the USFL schedule and timeline.
That
I
makes
agree.
sense. I mean, as far as Fox is concerned, they probably figure they're not holding
Yeah.
out on us because it's business as usual for them.
Yep. Like Brett said right here.
We're the impatient XFL fans that are used to February football.
Like Brett says right here, this needs to be handled by Thanksgiving. Needs to be announced, finalized, and meeting, just to be honest. Rob says, I don't see the USFL. I don't see how the USFL can sustain viewership and fans each team has without that connection. Without the eventual goal of home cities, can the USFL make it 3 more years without going to the XFL model? Anyways, they have. XFL hasn't. XFL is the one that reached out to the USFL. It's been said Ross Brandon was the point of contact. Reached out to the USFL. The Rock and Danny didn't want to do it. So again, we go back, like Daddy Ed and James told you. Daddy Ed gave you the numbers. Which model was actually better? USFL's model or XFL's model? It's on what side of the fence you want to play on. I mean, look right here. Brett says it. Made $8 million in year 1, $11 million in year 2, supposedly. I mean, Daddy Ed.
I'm just old school.
Right? We did the numbers.
I'm just old school. I just want to see butts in the seats. I'm sorry. It's just, to me, it's like during COVID when they had the basketball games on TV and they had football games on TV and there was nobody in the stands. Even the NFL, when they played the NFL games with nobody in the stands, it's just not the same. The energy is just not there. I just couldn't watch it. It was just painful to watch a game.
Oh, yeah. Here, Rob says, I agree with you. Rob says right here, will the money slowly dry up without butts in the seats, though? Well, according to Brett, who is the guy who does the USFL side of this, you see what he said right here. Made $8 million in year 1, $11 million in year 2. So did the money dry up for the XFL or the USFL? Didn't seem like it. Yeah. Right here. USFL has no numbers when it comes to money. Only we did better than the XFL. because Fox doesn't need to. They're a $14 billion company. They can lose money for a while if they really want to. I mean,
Yeah.
am I right, Daddy Ed?
Yeah, you're right.
Huh?
You're
I
right.
mean,
But
yeah,
but the
that's you're
same,
right.
yeah, but the same could be said for Vince McMahon. I mean, everybody thought he had endless pockets, and it wasn't going to make any difference either. And when he come out with his league and lost all his money, it hurt him. He didn't want anything to do with it. And who would have thought? You
Right.
know, he had money to burn when he started the league, and he kind of said that leading into his season. It's almost like, I'm going to stick it to the NFL. I don't care what it costs. I'm going to make a production out of this, but yet
Yeah,
it lasted a year. So,
exactly.
I mean,
Yeah, I
I don't
mean,
know.
it's all in how you got to look. It's all in how you look at it. You know, it's really on what team do you think is going to have the better model. You know, I mean, I'm done with hubs. I don't want to see hubs. I don't want to see practice hubs, to be honest with you. You know, like right here, Brahma Babe says, but they don't know how to compare that to numbers needed by individual owners to own the teams with all the overhead. You know, she goes on to say individual owners will want butts that generate revenue in tickets, merch, and advertising. Again, I'm going to go back to it. The XFL had butts in the seats. Did it generate them money? Or this merger wouldn't be happening? In my opinion.
If you want stability in the league, eventually you got to have private ownership for each one
I
of the
agree.
teams.
Agree.
But the problem is you got to do that leap all at once. You can't have two teams the first year, and now then you go to 5 teams that are private ownership. There just creates too many inequalities that way. You somehow or another you have to make the conversion to private ownership, but you got to be able to do that all at once. And what that means or how that's done, I guess that's above my pay grade. But I think until you get to private ownership, I still don't say if you want to talk stability, growth of the league, new locations, bringing on additional teams, all that. I think private ownership's got to be involved in there somewhere. But
look,
but what year? But what year does that happen?
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, look, I agree 100%. You have to have ownership. You have to. But here's what, again, I'm going to go back to the simple point. And Daddy Ed, you're a numbers guy, right? I remember we said on the phone, less than a week ago, right? Going over the numbers of what the XFL spent and hopefully and just on what they spent for travel, stuff like that, right? And we roughly came up to what? Close to $120 million, right? In numbers.
Yeah, that was without, as I call the incidentals.
Exactly.
All the stuff they spent money on that you and I didn't, we can't even figure. That was just incidentals that was on top of what we could come up with. So
right. And that was with butts in the seat. That was with butts in the seats. And they still didn't turn a profit.
Well, but I agree. I agree with him when he says the USFL was just leaner and meaner from an expense standpoint. Because, talking to Brett, Brett made the comment that the coaches of the USFL didn't make near the money that the coaches of the XFL made.
That's true.
The coaching staff itself, all the assistant coaches, the XFL had a lot more assistant coaches than the USFL had.
That is true.
So, I mean, so you look all across the board, you can see where the USFL was just a lot leaner and meaner. But then again, you look at the XFL coaches, yeah, they were under contract in the XFL at X amount of dollars a year. And, I thought I heard at one point that the head coaches for the XFL were making 200,000 a year, and they had signed 2-year contracts. Well, if
Mhm.
that's the case, we had 1 year. So technically, they got another year going of another $200,000.
See now,
What happens to the contract if you merge? Is that voided? Are they still obligated to pay those coaches? And what happens if you got teams where the head coaches are only making 120,000 and you've got 4 coaches that are making 200,000? I mean,
Mhm.
it just, to me, it's just, I don't know. If there was that big of an inequality as far as pay goes, you would think they would have to have that ironed out in year one.
Yeah. And you see what Kevin says here. That's what happens when the hub is in the South and you're flying out across the country. The USFL had 4 hubs that they were traveling from because the team in Michigan would have to fly to Birmingham when they played them. Birmingham would have to fly to Canton to play them. They'd have to fly to Memphis. You know what I'm
Yeah, but
saying?
you're talking the eastern half of the United States.
That's
Shoot,
true.
you can be in a car and you can be going through a state every couple hours when you get on the East Coast.
That is true.
Whereas every time you go west, it's a long haul, man.
Yeah.
And
Now,
all those trips to Vegas and all those trips to
all
Seattle had to start adding up there towards the end.
right. So let's do this. Let's do this. Let's see. Let's go at flights from Vegas
And
to
you made yeah, but you made a good point when we talked about it last week, and the fact that it ain't a matter of getting on Southwest and
okay. Here, look. I'll just show you.
and
I just Googled it. Right. Okay. Now, look. So flights from Vegas to Seattle. Or no, we can't do that. We can't do that. No. I did it wrong.
you can't have 54 or 53 football players, another 20 coaches, a couple 10 trainers, whatever it is. You can't do the take me away bottom line $200 or $150 a ticket from Southwest. You were making the comment about chartering a private flight and what that cost an hour. That's what had to be killing them.
Right. Look. Okay. So right here, I know you can't really see it, Daddy Ed, but I'll show you. So just from Arlington, Dallas to Seattle on Frontier, now we don't go there. We'll just go with the American, $248 round trip. Okay. But again, you go back to what you're saying. You're not flying commercial. You're flying
Yeah,
charter.
you're not going to have your players sitting in an airport on a 2-hour layover and all that crap. They're getting on a private jet that you're paying so much an hour on. And I know, one of my last jobs, we used to have to book flights for our owner, and I know what little dinky planes for parties of 2, 3, or 4 people cost to fly to Denver and back. I know what that costs for a charter flight. I can't even imagine what it costs for a Boeing jetliner with a whole team and coaches and trainers and everything, what that must have cost them an hour. I mean,
So, here you go. So now this is air charter services. Okay. Air charter services. Now let's pull it up. Okay. Let's see. Cost per hour. Now this is just 4 passengers. $3,000 per hour.
I know that when we used to book private flights so that we could send executives to go skiing, and there was maybe possibly 3 or 4 of them going or whatever. I know that a private flight for just those 3 or 4 players to Denver and back, or I, you name it, any ski location, that it was almost $25,000-$30,000 a flight, and you're talking 3 or 4 people to go for a weekend. Imagine what that would cost for a 737 to be a private flight.
Okay, what does a 737? We'll do a 747.
Oh shit, 747. You'd be taking some of the fan base.
We're just, okay. So here, a Boeing 747. Okay. Here's what it costs. On average, $20,000 to $50,000 an hour. All right. You want to do a 37? Let's do a 37, shall we? $17,000 an hour.
So you got the teams flying out of Arlington, and to go to Seattle, it was probably a 4-hour flight.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 hours there, 5 hours by the time you have pregame and the game and getting back on the plane and coming back. I'd say you're probably talking 14, 15 hours total. Mm-hmm. Do the math there, 14 times whatever thousand that was. And that's just one flight.
Right.
They got 4 of them going on every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You got teams flying together. Did the Battlehawks and the Renegades or whoever, I don't care, fill in the blank. When they flew to St. Louis to play, did they have both teams on the plane? I'm sure they probably did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. So, all right, Daddy Ed. It's getting late. We're in overtime.
I learned about too many federal programs. My brain's hurting.
I know, right?
I need some popcorn.
Today, huh?
I need some popcorn and watch the second half of the Monday night game.
Now, here we go. So Jay says this. Let's leave it at this. The USFL makes money off viewership. Viewership, a hub scenario is a necessity evil with this merger for the first year. 6 or 7 hubs for 12 teams. You may not like it, but hubs will work in 2024. No way they dive all the way in for 10 stadiums and make the same mistake the XFL with this merger. Those flight tickets cost peanuts compared to the cost of the stadiums. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about hotels.
Right, we didn't even talk about the hotels or anything like that. So,
yeah. So,
Daddy Ed, we got anything else? Because I'm tired.
Yeah, I think that's early,
and I'm fat.
I know what I'm getting bread for Christmas now. That's perfectly clear.
Oh my God! Will you stop picking on Brett? He wasn't feeling well too.
Brett's my man. I gotta give him shit, but
that's true. Hey, this is the bottom line.
Remember, there you go.
What?
I was just gonna make sure you didn't blurt out something else.
It's your show. Ended, bro.
Brought to you by Wild Sun Winery and Brewing Company. Sooner or later, we're going to get this stuff figured out. Not only from football, but technology. And we are going to bring you guys the show you deserve. Until then, just bear with us, man. We'll get it figured out. And
Thanks for watching.
Is the bottom line.